went too far. I told him he wouldn't divorce me BC, we would be financially ruined 3 days later. Not all that glitter is gold. I ruined my marriage as a result of my greed. I don't even know where to start my story from. I'm so ashamed of my actions. I cheated on my husband with his boss, who happens to be my ex-boyfriend. Don't judge me, guys. I honestly regret my actions. I thought I could literally eat my cake and have it. Everything backfired in a twinkle of an eye. Now I'm at a crossroad and I don't know what to do. I honestly don't wish this on my worst enemy. I'm in a state of a fiasco right now. I regret everything. If I could turn back the hands of time, I would do things differently. I cheated on my husband with his boss, who is my ex-boyfriend, and now he's on the verge of finding out. I regret my actions. I don't know what to do. I'm at a crossroads right now. I don't want to lose my marriage, and most importantly, I don't want my husband to stop working for my ex-boyfriend. Don't judge me, guys. Before you judge me, please listen to my story. Maybe then you would understand why I did what I did. Hi guys, my name is Olivia, and I am 29 years old. The name of my husband is Anthony, and he is 30 years old. Anthony and I got married 2 years ago. Anthony is the best thing that has ever happened to me. He is the absolute love of my life. My marriage to Anthony was a beautiful one. He pampered me and treated me like a queen. I never lacked anything. He provided everything I needed and even placed my parents on a monthly stipend. He got me my very first car immediately after our wedding, and on our first wedding anniversary, he bought a house for me. Anthony is not just a generous giver. He is a very kind man. I don't know what came over me. I ruined my beautiful marriage. I can still remember that fateful day like it was yesterday. Our lives changed forever. We went from living in a comfortable apartment to living in a shared apartment. It still feels like a dream. I practically lost everything on that fateful day, including my husband. Anthony became a shadow of himself. He went from being a happy, jovial guy to a complete sadist. He always snapped at me for any little thing. He was doing some menial job, but that was barely enough. We couldn't afford the luxury lifestyle we were used to any longer. Anthony's boss sized everything we owned. The cars, house, and even his accounts were frozen. He was almost arrested, but the properties seized were enough to cover for the money. At some point, I got tired of everything. I got so used to living like a queen that I wasn't happy with the way we were living. Anthony kept assuring me that everything would be fine, but that wasn't enough. I wanted him to be as rich as he was before. I decided to help him out. I wished I never did. If I could go back in time, I would do things differently. Seeing Anthony sad always made me ask my ex-boyfriend for a favor. Don't judge me, guys. I was helpless and desperate. I wanted to help my husband back on his feet. Jake was willing to help, but on a condition. Jake proposed I sleep with him just once and he would secure my husband a good job in a reputable company. I refused initially, but decided to go through with it after pondering on the whole situation for some days. I told Anthony about the job offer and he was very excited. The joy on his face when he heard someone was willing to give him a job was the only sign I needed to go ahead. I wanted to see him back on his feet again, and most importantly, I wanted to start living large again. Anthony loves being an engineer. It's something he loves doing. So he was very happy when I told him about the job. Getting a good job ever since he lost his job has been hard because no one wants to employ an alleged thief. So he was excited that someone was willing to give him a chance. I met with Jake the next day and we slept together. I felt horrible at first, but I shook off the guilt and convinced myself I wasn't wrong. I was doing everything for my beloved husband. Jake kept his promise and offered Anthony a job in his company, but unfortunately I couldn't bring myself to tell Anthony the whole truth. I didn't tell him Jake was my ex-boyfriend. I actually lied to him. I lied to him that Jake was my cousin's fiancé. I know the man married. I knew there was no way he would accept the job if he knew Jake was my ex-boyfriend. Anthony is a very principled man. He would rather remain jobless than seek favors from someone he knew I dated before. So I kept everything to myself. I cried myself to bed for 3 consecutive days. I was in denial for some days. I couldn't believe I cheated on my husband and broke our marriage vows. I was emotionally down. Anthony noticed my mood and asked what was wrong with me. Guys, honestly, at that point, I wanted to confess everything to him, but I didn't have the courage to do that. I was scared of what he would do if he found out I cheated on him. After thinking of how everything would go wrong if he finds out, I lied to him that nothing was wrong with me and that I was just under the weather. At that point, I knew I had to shake up the guilt before I got caught. One thing about telling lies is because you need more lies to cover up. I wasn't happy lying to my husband. We promised each other that we would be transparent in our marriage, but here I was, breaking that promise. My affair with Jake continued. I couldn't bring myself to stop seeing Jake. The truth is, Jake is my first love. I had known him ever since we were kids. The only reason I left him was because he wasn't rich. I dumped him to marry Anthony because Anthony was a very rich man when we met, and Jake wasn't earning much then, but fortunately for him, he is filthy rich now. I started regretting not being patient with Jake when I saw how rich he became when I left. I wished I was a little bit patient with him. Maybe I wouldn't have ended up with Anthony. Don't get me wrong, guys, Anthony is a good man, but I never really loved him. His generosity was what drew me to him, and he wasn't physically attractive like Jake. Everything was going so well, my affair with Jake continued to blossom. It got to a stage that I was no longer feeling bad about cheating on Anthony. Although at times I do feel bad for him, I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. Jake, on the other hand, was busy spoiling me with gifts. He was always gifting things, from expensive clothes to shoes and jewelry. My love affair with Jake continued to the point that we were no longer discreet. One day, Anthony almost caught me with Jake. I was on a date with Jake. I didn't know someone took a picture of me and Jake together and sent it to Anthony. Anthony called me and inquired where I was. I didn't know what was happening, so I lied to him I was at home. He kept calling and repeating the same question. It was at that point I knew something was wrong. I quickly ended my dinner date with Jake, but luckily for me, I saw Anthony's cousin at the same restaurant. She was trying to hide, but I caught a glimpse of her. At that point, everything finally made sense. Apparently, she took a picture of me and Jake. On my way home, I was scared and visibly shaking. It felt like my entire world was crashing down. I knew I had to act fast, else I would lose my marriage. Luckily for me, I got home before Anthony. That gave me enough time to think of something. When Anthony arrived that day, he was angry and fuming with anger. I quickly came up with a lie to save my marriage. I told him I went to see his boss with my cousin. You guys remember I told him Jake was my cousin's fiance, right? So I told him I went there with my cousin to properly thank Jake for offering him a job, and that at some point my cousin caught an urgent call and left us there to go attend something. So he asked me why I lied earlier. I told him I wanted it to be a surprise. Somehow he brought the lie. That night was very emotional for me. He apologized for doubting and not trusting me. He made me promise never to lie to him again. At that point, I felt bad that I didn't know when I started crying uncontrollably. Here I was, cheating on the only man in the whole world that I know would gladly give up his life for me. Anthony doesn't deserve this. I know he would break into pieces if he ever finds out I have been cheating on him and lying to cover up my extramarital affair. I'm at a crossroad right now. I feel bad for my husband. What should I do? Should I confess everything to my husband Anthony and stop my affair with Jake? Or should I just enjoy all the attention and love I'm getting from Jake? Please, I need advice. Update. Hi guys, I'm back to update you guys. I didn't confess. I couldn't bring myself to do that. I didn't want to lose my marriage and I didn't want to break Anthony's hearts. I continued my affair with Jake, but unfortunately for me, I got. Yes, guy, Anthony caught me. I thought I would be the one to confess everything to Anthony. I never envisioned getting caught by Anthony. On one fateful day, I forgot my phone in the sitting room and took a nap. I don't know what prompted Anthony to go through my phone because he had never done that before. That was how he discovered I was cheating on him, but he didn't know who I was cheating on him with. Hell literally broke loose when Anthony discovered I was cheating on him. He woke me up from my nap and dragged me out. I was shocked because I have never seen him like that before. He started hauling insults at me. I was lost for a few seconds. It was when he threw the phone at me and saw those messages that I understood what he was talking about. He started throwing my things out one after the other and asked me to leave his house. I couldn't believe my eyes, guys. It was as if Anthony was acting under the influence of something. I was in shock. I fell on my knees and started begging him to forgive me, but all efforts to get to listen to me proved abortive. The more I tried, the angrier he became. The worst part was that I was literally freezing to the death. He told me he was no longer interested in the marriage, that I should be prepared to receive divorce papers. He told me he started suspecting I was cheating on him a long time ago and was only waiting on the right opportunity to get evidence. I tried explaining to him that everything I did was for him, but he paid deaf ears to me. After exhausting all options, I decided to resort to emotional blackmail. I told him he should have gone ahead and tried, but he can't divorce me because we will be financially ruined because he would lose his job if he divorced me. I told him I was cheating on him with his boss, who is my ex-boyfriend, and that I did it to help him secure a job. I can still remember the shock on his face when I told him this. He almost had a heart attack. He got more upset when I told him I did everything for his sake. At that point, nothing prepared me for what he did next. Anthony gave me 3 dirty slaps. It happened so fast I was shocked, guys. I never knew I married a violent man. Anthony was fuming with rage. I picked a few of my things and left. I went to my best friend's place. I wanted to go to Jake's house, but I called him and he told me he was on a business trip. All through that day, I was sad. I didn't know Anthony was an ingrate. How could he still throw me out even though I told him I did everything for him? Don't judge me, guys. I'm not justifying my affair with Jake, but how inconsiderate can Anthony be? He didn't care that I was freezing outside. He even gave me 3 dirty slaps. My cheeks were swollen. I cried to sleep that day. It took getting caught for me to realize I wronged Anthony. At that point, I made up my mind to break things off completely with Jake. Suddenly, all the expensive clothes, shoes, and jewelry didn't matter to me anymore. All I wanted was my husband. I was 100% confident that we could work on our marriage. I was so sure Anthony would not be able to divorce me since he would risk losing his job if he ever did that. I knew what that job meant to him. That day, I was unable to sleep. Time went by very fast. I got a call from Anthony the next day. The joy on my face that day when he called me was magical. I had butterflies in my stomach. He asked me to come to the house and he had a surprise for me. I was very excited that I didn't even remember to shower before dashing out. I think the thought of reuniting with my husband must have clouded my sense of reasoning, but nothing prepared me for the surprise I got when I arrived at our apartment. I was surprised to see my parents and even Anthony. I was surprised why almost everyone was gathered there. I tried greeting everyone, but they all ignored me, including my parents. I was dumbfounded. While I was still trying to make sense of everything, Anthony arrived and everything began to make sense. It was then it occurred to me that Anthony called me there to disgrace me. He brought out his phone and showed everyone compromising pictures of me and Jake together. Apparently, he sent those pictures to his phone the day he had access to my phone. I was embarrassed. I wanted the ground to open so badly so I could disappear. My parents felt so embarrassed they were ashamed of me. The look on their faces said it all. It was at that point I bursted into tears. I couldn't hold my tears any longer. How can everyone judge me without hearing from me what actually happened? Even my parents that were supposed to stand up for me bowed their heads in shame. Worst part is, Anthony narrated the story in a way that painted me like the devil himself. He told everyone I married him for his money and not because I really loved him. He said it took him losing his job to realize that. He told them how I changed and turned into a monster immediately. He lost his job and could no longer provide for me. He didn't stop there. He went ahead to tell them I started having an affair with my ex-boyfriends for money when he couldn't afford to cater for my numerous, and how I made one of my ex-boyfriends employ him. At that point, I could not stand the defamation. I decided to talk. I told everyone Anthony was lying and that everything I did was for him. I told them I only cheated because I wanted to secure a job for my husband. It was at that point Anthony's mom stood up and gave me a dirty slap. She started calling me names. My parents couldn't take the embarrassment any longer, so they walked out. I ran after them to explain everything to them, but they warned me never to ever come near them. I went back to my friend's place because Anthony was still angry. The anger was justified. I thought he would forgive me, and Will would work everything out when he was calmer, but Anthony proved me wrong. 3 days later, I got a call from someone who introduced himself as a lawyer. I gave the lawyer my address, and in less than 30 minutes, he arrived with divorce papers. I was shocked, guys. I almost passed out. It took everything in me for me to keep standing on my feet. I flinged the divorce papers away and instantly booked a ride to Anthony's house. I was shocked when I got there and the house was empty. I only met my things outside. Anthony burnt all the designer clothes and shoes Jake bought for me. He burnt all my valuables to ashes, things that cost millions. I don't even know how he saw them because I hid those things carefully. Luckily for me, I saw the expensive diamonds Jake got for me scattered on the ground. I picked them up with tears in my eyes. I was seriously weeping, guys. I never knew I married a monster. Out of rage, I picked up my phone and called Jake. I asked to please do me a favor and sack Anthony immediately when he got back from his business trip. I wanted to teach him a lesson he would never forget. I know he will come back crying to me when he loses the job. Then we will settle, and I will ask Jake to give him back the job. But unfortunately for me, things didn't go the way I anticipated. I got the biggest shock of my life when Jake told me. He was informed Anthony resigned from the job. I couldn't believe my ears. I felt like my whole world had crumbled. It was game over for me, guys. I tried calling Anthony several times, but he wasn't responding to my calls. He even blocked me at some point. After all efforts to reach him proved abortive, I gave up and decided to sign the divorce papers. It wasn't easy to make that decision. I wanted to fight for our marriage, but Anthony wasn't leaving any room for that. Soon the divorce proceedings started. It was mentally draining. I was exhausted all through. Every time we came to the court, I tried talking to Anthony to tell him the whole truth, but he refused to listen to me. He wouldn't even look at me. He despised me, and he didn't hide that fact. Since there was no property to share or children involved, our divorce was finalized sooner than expected. That was the worst day of my life. I cried all through that day. I knew I just lost a gem. I knew I would never find a man like Anthony ever again. Anthony was a good man. Even when he lost his job, he still made sure he provided food for me. I never went to bed hungry. Anthony put my needs before his. Where will I ever find such a man again? Update. Hi guys, I'm back again to update you guys on my life after the divorce. After the divorce, I decided to just forge ahead and continue with my life. I got tired of crying my eyes out. Worst of all was that I was very broke. I used all my savings to pay the lawyer that handled the divorce case. In fact, the money wasn't enough. I had to borrow from my friend to complete the payment. I decided to go back to Jake since I was already divorced and single. I went to his house because he had not been picking my calls. I got another heartbreak when I arrived at Jake's house. I met a lady who introduced herself to me as Jake's fiancée. I was shocked, guys. A few seconds later, Jake arrived and was furious at me for coming to his house. He dragged me out and warned me never to come to him ever again. He told me he only used me and wanted to prove the point that I was a gold digger. I was shocked, guys. I wasn't expecting to hear that from him. I felt ashamed of myself. He said he only took revenge on me. He told me he was happy I'm divorced and that now he's glad I finally have the feeling of what it means to be dumped. I was sad, guys. I felt used. He threw me out of his house and asked me never to return again. Everything felt like a film trick. I never expected such a dubious character from him. Anyways, I cleaned my eyes and decided to count my losses. I decided to move on, but it wasn't easy. I was broke. I would have sold the designers Jake gifted me if Anthony didn't burn them to hashes. After searching for jobs with getting any, I decided to sell off the diamonds. I took the diamonds to a jewelry store, and to my surprise, they told me the diamonds were fake. I felt embarrassed. I was almost arrested for trying to sell off a fake diamond. Can you guys imagine? I'm sure the designers' clothes were fake too. How gullible can one be? Jake took advantage of my naiveness and ruined my marriage. I can't believe I allowed him to destroy the beautiful union I built with my husband. I was perplexed. Everything was a lie. Jake fooled me. He saw how helpless I was and he took advantage of me. But unfortunately, it was too late to cry over spilled milk. Anthony, on the other hand, got his back. His boss called him back after he discovered Anthony was betrayed by his business partner and that he didn't actually steal the money. He got everything back. The house and cars were replaced with even a better one. I wished I was patient enough. I wished I was content and didn't allow my greed take over me. I became depressed. Suddenly, nothing made sense to me any longer. I became a shadow of myself. The thought of everything made me sick. Now I understand the saying that patience is a virtue. If I was patient enough, I would have been living in luxury right now, but my greed destroyed everything. I lost everything as a result of my greed. That's my story, guys. I'm not proud of what I have done. I take full accountability for my actions. I hope someone out there learns from my story. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. Don't lose a good man because of material things. I learned the hard way. Believe me, everything wasn't worth it in the end. Most importantly, learn to be patient with your partners. Patience is a virtue everyone should possess.